Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Vinitaly International Academy, announcing the 24th of our Italian Wine Ambassador courses to be held in London, Austria, and Hong Kong from the 27th to the 29th of July. Are you up for the challenge of this demanding course? Do you want to be the next Italian Wine Ambassador? Learn more and apply now at vinitalyinternational.com.
Hello, everybody. My name is Polly Hammond, and you are listening to Uncorked, the Italian wine podcast series about all things marketing and communication. Join me each week for candid conversations with experts from within and beyond the wine world as we explore what it takes to build a profitable business in today's constantly shifting environment. This week, we welcome Natasha Sumkina, a St. Petersburg native who is spearheading Russian language wine comms for the Gen Z and Millennial markets. Join us as we explore trends in education versus entertainment, social media and socializing, and how we may need to rethink what we think about the Russian wine consumer. Let's get into it. Welcome, Natasha. I'm so pleased that you were able to join me here today.
Hi, Polly. My pleasure.
I had the chance to meet you last week in Bordeaux at the Vinexpo Symposium on Act for Change. And as we were talking, one of the things that really stood out to me is that, we speak, we present, we go to these things. We're forever talking about young people in wine and young drinkers in wine and different markets in wine. But then when we have the opportunity to give the mic to someone, we give the mic to someone who's established. They've been around forever. They know all the things. And anybody who's listened to me knows that I get really sick of hearing the establishment talk about what do we do with the next generation or the different markets. And then I met you, and you have just started a Russian language podcast that is specifically geared toward introducing young people and young Russian speakers specifically to the world of wine. And I thought, well, why don't we get you in here? And instead of all of us geezers trying to, guess, let's just ask you the questions that I know for myself as a marketer, I'm super curious about. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I hope that's okay.
Yes, it sounds exciting.
So for everyone who wasn't in Bordeaux and they didn't get to meet you, can you just tell me a little bit about your expertise, the areas that you've worked in, and now the podcast that you've just started?
All right. So I entered the world of wine in 2019, just before the pandemics, and I started with WSET 2 in London. And then I got my certificates in October 2019, and in November, I was already in Burgundy studying for level 3. And then in the beginning of 2020, I was going to go to London to continue my studies for the WSET diploma. But then the pandemic happened and I got stuck in St. Petersburg. It's my native town. So at first I was devastated because I couldn't keep on studying. They organized some online classes, but it wasn't the same. And then they renewed the classes in London, but I still couldn't go because of the restrictions, and COVID. So I found a job. I became an import manager in a wine importing company in Russia, in St. Petersburg. And I worked there for a year, and I imported about 40 new wines into Russian markets. And we worked with European producers
during pandemic months?
Yes, during the pandemics in 2021, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay, great. Keep going.
Yeah, we worked with European producers from France, from Spain and Italy. It was very exciting. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet each other, face to face, but we kept on close communication via email and Zoom and all that. And then in the beginning of 2021, I've saved up enough money and I decided to go to London to keep studying for my diploma finally. And then the war happened in Ukraine, and I was again in between things. I didn't really know what to do and how to approach this situation. Because on the one hand, I wanted to stay in Russia, in this kind of situation, and I was like, afraid of going abroad. But at the same time, I had my dream. And I wanted to get my diploma and go deeper into the world of wine. But in the end, I decided that I'm not going to be stopped this time. I'm not giving in, not giving up. And I decided to go. And I already had 2 exams out of 5. So I left my job in February to go to London to study, and I was thinking about what should I do, because I really love talking about wine, hosting tastings, because in 2021, I organized my tasting club in St. Petersburg, and I motivated wine enthusiasts to gather together and to taste amazing wines and to learn more about wines. And
I want to ask some questions about that.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that. That's MonaVina, correct?
Yes, that's right, MonaVina.
Yes. Okay. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But so the podcast. So then, how did the podcast come to be?
So I was thinking about how can I keep teaching people about wine and keep talking about it. And then I was listening to a podcast, I don't remember what it was about, but I was thinking I could do the same, but about wine, and I checked if there were other podcasts about wine in Russian, and there were not a few, like a couple. So I decided that's it. That's what I'm going to do.
Wow. So I thought it was really interesting actually going in and doing the research for this interview, because everything that you produce is very clear. I mean, it is specifically Russian language oriented.
Yeah.
So there's no ambiguity around which market you're going for. You're 27 years old.
Yeah.
So you are very much on that cusp of the millennials and the Gen Zs. And and you're living, you are living between 2 worlds. I assume that you have your family at home in Russia and you are an expat here in Europe. Was your family, were they wine drinkers? Was our industry challenging for you to discover at home?
No, it wasn't very challenging, because in my family, during family celebrations, we drink wine as well as other drinks. But my family doesn't know anything about wine, so I wasn't educated in wine this way. And I had to discover it myself. But I had an interest in wine since, I don't know, maybe 16. I remember this time we went with my mom to Paris, and we went to a restaurant called Le Prokop. This one? It's the oldest one in Paris. So we went there, and it was very beautiful there. And someone ordered a bottle of wine. I remember it very well. It was Gewürztraminer by Gustave Laurence. And I couldn't even pronounce the name at the time, but I memorized the bottle. And it was the first time I was impressed by wine. Like many other people who were impressed by Gewürztraminer and its aromatic profile, I was one of them. And since then, I was just curious. I always wanted to try something new. And then I had a friend in Rome who went to a sommelier school in Rome. And she talked a lot about wine, and she inspired me a lot this way. So
one of the things that you say in your podcast description is no snobbery, no no jargon. You don't want the language, that you want it to be entertaining and educational. And what I find really interesting about that, I always laugh. So I'm the oldest person at Five Forest, and all of my team is younger than me. And they hear this rhetoric about young people drinking wine or younger people drinking wine. And they're like, the wine industry says millennials and Gen Z are killing wine, yada, yada, yada. And my team always says, it's not that we're not drinking wine, it's that we're not drinking your wine. We're not. Yeah. So for you, here you are, you're in Paris. I mean, like, you are part of the history and the establishment of wine. Did you find that you sort of fell in love with the heritage part of wine? Or is it more like what we're hearing from a lot of young people, that it's about natural wines, experimental wines? And, like, what has your experience in consumption been so far?
I definitely had a natural wine period in my wine journey. Yes, it was 2019, actually, right when I started. And there was this bar in St. Petersburg. It's called MonaVina, and they specifically specialize in natural wines and biodynamic and all that kind of wines. And I just like their vibe, and I like spending time there with my friends, tasting new interesting wines that didn't really smell like wine, And it was exciting. But then with time, I realized that, so to say, heritage wines are also interesting, and there is also a lot to explore. So probably we should let younger generations to walk their own path, into the world of wine. Start with natural wine. There's nothing bad about it, even though there is lots of criticism. I mean, it's a good way for younger people to get into wine.
To become wine drinkers.
Exactly.
I love that you said that. I hope if there's one thing that people take away from this interview, it was, yes, actually, this is, natural wine is a gateway to all of the non-natural wines, all the more traditional or heritage wines that we have. So awesome. High five on that. But in terms of that, like, education or entertainment value, we've got two very disparate beliefs in wine, that our job is to entertain and create joy, and that's what's going to get our wine on their table. And then we also have like what I'm going to describe as the more old school, which is, if we teach them why the wine is important, then they will love it. Like, from your perspective and from your content that you're creating, and then also your audience, what is the balance of that? What's more important, or are they equal?
I think they're equal, but in the beginning, I think the best way for younger people to attract younger people to the world of wine is by entertaining them. Not giving them lots of knowledge, but start with entertainment and then give them a bit of knowledge. Learning shouldn't be something serious. So I think this is a very good way to combine these two things. Start with entertainment, but then give little dosage of knowledge as well.
And you say that even as you're going through, a full-on wine education. So I think that that's what's interesting, is that you have obviously, with your personality, opted with the erudition, but that's not the way necessarily to get to your friends or your boyfriends or your cousins or your siblings, that's not for everyone.
Yeah, I'm going deep into wine because I'm fascinated by that. And I changed my career because at first I used to be a linguist, translator and interpreter. But then I decided to change career. And honestly, I started with WSET just for fun. I didn't really know if I'm going to continue this path, but I fell in love and I decided to keep going. But in the beginning, it was just, to try something new.
Do you know what that reminds me of? So when I was going through university, way back in the day, one of the things was, so I went to university in America, and we have general education requirements, which take about 2 years. And they are low-level introductory courses to lots of different topics. And the number of students, like I did, that you get into a class that you were never exposed to, and there's this amazing dynamic teacher, like the person who's conveying it, they themselves are so in love with the thing that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that just really, really comes through. And we look at it and we're like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. And you toddle off and you change your major and you change your whole life because there was this one person who just embodied everything. Just, I don't want to use the word joyful because that's not really it. Just the interest, but the cleverness and the ability to do something with it. They've written and they teach and all of this other stuff. And it's almost like saying, okay, what we need to do is we need to get our most dynamic communicators teaching those level 1 WSET courses. And I'm not telling WSET how to run their business, but this notion of making it about curiosity, not about, are you going into the wine profession, and getting people in the door who can actually have the entertainment and the life, the dynamism that people are like, holy shit, this is a great career option. So how are you finding the response from the Russian-speaking audience? You're obviously fabulous with the English language compared to, what you saw in London, what your experience is in Spain.
They say that in countries like Spain and other European countries, the consumption of wine is falling down. Although in Russia, it's the opposite trend. We are moving away from vodka and starting to drink more and more wine. And wine industry is a growing industry in Russia, not only in terms of production, because nowadays there are lots of wine production in Russia, but also in terms of consumption, because people get more and more interested in wine.
With more young people and more women?
Yeah, more women, especially more women. And I'd say so. More younger people. Yeah.
The decision to go Russian language only, is that to literally remain geo-targeted, or is that to reach an underserviced Russian-speaking population globally?
I just wanted to, contribute something to wine education in my country. I love my country, and I just want people in my country to learn something more about wine, because I think it's not only an exciting way to learn about wine per se, but also about the world around you, to learn languages, to travel, to learn geography, culture, history, and so much more. So I just wanted to do something, for my people.
Now let's come back to your tasting club, because I'm fascinated by this. So MonaVina, you set up at home in St. Petersburg during in the phases of pandemic time. How did you get that message out? Who attended? What were we drinking? I want to hear all about that.
All right. So I organized it in September 2020, if I remember right.
Right.
And at first it was just my friends, whom I inspired with wine. I'm talking all the time about wine. So they got inspired and they decided to join my wine club. And then I started, not promoting really, but just, speaking about my wine club and stories. And my friends started inviting their friends or started doing reposts in Instagram, and new people started to come, And and now we are kind of like
What were you tasting? What were you serving?
Yeah, sure. So I was saying that now we're like a small community, of wine enthusiasts. And at first, at my first tasting, we tasted just wines of different grape varieties like Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Merlot. I just wanted to give them the gist of wine, that it can be very different, And then we started to go deeper into each grape variety. So we had Sauvignon Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc from different regions and countries.
Sure.
Yeah, and that with every grape variety. And we also had off-topic, so to say, tastings. And in each of the tastings, I tried to include a Russian wine. For example, Sauvignon Blanc from Russia, or I don't know, Chardonnay from Russia and all that, just to show people that we ourselves in our country can make good wine too, Yeah, there's lots of prejudice about Russian wine inside Russia. Many people still think that Russian wine is low quality, even though it's not true. For the past 5 to 10 years, wine production has grown in Russia, and the quality of wines has also grown.
You said that you've actually grown into a community. So that community still exists. You're still talking wine, despite the fact that now you're in Spain today, but there's no abatement of the community or the discussion.
Yeah, it still exists. And many of the people from the community follow me on Instagram, and they're very excited about my podcast, and they always text me about something new they tried, or they're asking for more tastings, because I come back to Russia from time to time. For example, I'm going to be there in July, and most likely we're going to gather together and taste something exciting. I brought some wine from the UK, and they're very excited to try it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You say very specifically in your description that you have a focus on conscious consumption. And what I found interesting on your Instagram post, which, yes, I did get Google Translate to translate all of those for me.
Oh my God.
On your Instagram post is you even specifically talk about recommended daily consumption maximums. This is the amount for women and this is the amount for men. When you say conscious consumption, what specifically does that include? Is it sustainability, ethics, moderation? What was the decision on that?
Many times I've seen people who like wine, but they don't know where to stop, And I kind of experimented, with the amounts of alcohol my body can consume without any consequences. And for me, it's 3 glasses of wine, and that's it. After that, I start dancing on the table, in the bar. So that's it. So I want to promote the same culture among young people in Russia, not to drink to get drunk, but to drink to consciously, and to enjoy the moment, really, but enjoying it consciously, So yeah, it's not only about self-care and, care about your body, and future you in the morning without any headaches, but also I want to promote sustainability in Russia, because when I was in Bordeaux, it was kind of absurd for me to listen to all these people talk about organic wines, sustainability, ecology, climate change, and all that, when in Russia, we're still somewhere in the beginning of this path, There are lots of wine producers, but there are not many, and by not many, I mean almost none, organic producers or sustainable producers. So I think if we promote sustainability among the consumers, and especially younger consumers, it can help boost and motivate the producers to go sustainable.
Of course. And that mirrors what we see, outside of Russia. We see all around the number of people who say things like, they changed what they were drinking. They changed how they, were consuming products. They changed packaging, or even they changed their recycling habits because they had a granddaughter who told them that this was something that they had to do. It's been such a driving force for change across the populations. What interests me on the conscious consumption or the consumption in moderation is this notion that we're not trying. So in wine marketing, I have a lot of wineries who I talk to who they're so uncomfortable with the moderation discussion because the underpinnings of that is drink less of our wine. Like, it's going to be buy less, drink less, as opposed to having a healthy relationship with wine or any alcohol for a very long time makes you a better lifetime customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just putting it in like capitalist language. But this notion that if we're doing it from the very beginning of their journey with our product, I specifically think about women and the reduced recommendations compared to the high rates of drinking that we're seeing happening all over the world, that can we start them off on the right foot, like just embrace it in the very early days.
Yeah.
Don't try to make it remediation to bad habits.
Yeah, and probably since we're just starting, in Russia with the wine industry, probably it's a good idea to incorporate all those ideas, right in the beginning from the start. Yeah.
Sure. So Russia, my understanding, is always quite a challenging space for us in marketing because it's so strict for any kind of marketing or advertising communications.
Yeah.
What were you finding? So you introduced 40 wines to the market when you were working in importation, and you have an audience, right, who communicates back with you. They do engage with you about what you're doing. What are you finding are the key criteria for growth, specifically in the younger audience? Does influence work?
Yeah, influencing works very well, and especially with Instagram. And we have lots of big influencers in Russia who are very popular among my generation and younger generation, TikTok, all that stuff. So it really works. Yes.
So TikTok works well for Russia. And do we know if it works well specifically for wine in Russia?
I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen some sommeliers and wine experts who are creating content in TikTok, and they're doing that very well. It's what I was talking about, entertainment plus a bit of knowledge, So they're doing that. They're creating small videos in which they are talking about wine in an entertaining way, but also educating people about it.
And those are younger content creators. Yeah. And when I say younger, I really dislike sort of the generational language, but I'm 48, so they're younger than Gen Xers. They're millennial, Gen Z. Okay, so what I find super interesting about that is that wine, by and large, in the English-speaking markets, has not done a great job embracing TikTok, because what it is it's a lot of people my age and older are being told, oh, you should be on TikTok. And then it's actually the young people who are saying, the younger generation saying, please don't, please just give us a space that's our own. You've got Facebook. Nobody wants to go there. You mostly have Instagram. It's all yours. Just leave us our spaces. So maybe there's a really good lesson for us as marketers and communicators not to go in and talk on those spaces, but to go in and listen. So you brought up Instagram and how people are using Instagram. One of the things that I remarked upon is that you use Instagram for long form content in a way that isn't common to wineries or wine brands. So extensive posting, maxing out the limits on that. Is this a market specific decision that you, as you were saying, my audience uses this as news?
So, as I said, Instagram in Russia works a bit differently rather than in the US or in Europe. Russian audience likes long read posts. They like to get information through Instagram, and not only through posts, but also through stories. So lots of influencers are making storytellings through stories, and they're interacting with their audience this way. So yeah, this is a specific of Russian Instagram. Yeah.
That is fascinating for me because that's something that I wouldn't have known that like right now I could use in my marketing and my communication. So super awesome on that. As you are looking at content creation, will you be focusing on Russian language participants, or will you be interviewing non-Russians and then translating that information for your Russian audience?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about interviewing non-Russian speaking specialist experts and non-specialists, why not, about wine, and then translating that for the podcast. Yes, I was thinking that too. But also Russian speakers, I actually have this idea, or more like a dream, to speak to winemakers in Russia, and to promote their wines through the podcast.
I'm looking at the amount of work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So you've got your WSET diploma that you're working on. You've got your community that you're working on. You've got a podcast that you're just in the early phases of getting started. What's next? Where does all this lead? What do you want to be when you grow up, Natasha?
Well, I want to be a wine educator and communicator. And actually, I think my dream is about to come true, because just yesterday I had a Zoom call with a founder of Russian wine school, online wine school. And most likely I'm going to be creating an English wine course for the school. So it's going to be about teaching English to wine experts and wine enthusiasts. So wine English.
If we're sitting here having the conversation about how do we get more people working in our industry, what's the feedback that you have to share with us about that?
All right. As a Russian speaker, I think it would have been difficult for me to get access to information if I didn't know any foreign languages. So, of course, there are books and some websites that are translated into Russian, or you can use Google Translate, and learn. But at the same time, I'm always encouraging people in Russia to learn foreign languages, at least English, so that they have access to more information, not only inside Russia, and not only the information that is given to me and to them through official channels. And I'm not talking about wine only right now, but also to think for yourself, and to read other sources.
Where can we find you online? How can we learn more and sort of follow your journey?
So first of all, as I said, Instagram. And I have two
and on Instagram
accounts.
You're wine_by_glass.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one. This is the podcast. This is the podcast account. And I also have my personal one, which is Sumkina Tasha. And also, of course, podcasts on every platform you can think about. Apple Podcasts, Castbox, you know it.
Spotify, wherever you listen to your pods. I won't make you struggle with a bad connection any longer, but I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Natasha.
Thank you, Polly. It was my pleasure again. And thank you very much for inviting me.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening, and a great big thank you to Natasha for joining me today. The Italian Wine Podcast is among the leading wine podcasts in the world, and the only one with daily episodes. Tune in each day and discover all our different shows. Be sure to join us next Sunday for another look at the world of wine marketing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Italian Wine Podcast, brought to you by Vinitaly Academy, home of the gold standard of Italian wine education. Do you want to be the next ambassador? Apply online at vinitalyinternational.com for courses in London, Austria, and Hong Kong, the 27th to the 29th of July. Remember to subscribe and like Italian Wine Podcast, and catch us on SoundCloud, Spotify, and wherever you get your pods. You can also find our entire back catalog of episodes at italianwinepodcast.com.
Hi guys, I'm Joy Livingston and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to italianwinepodcast.com.